Welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I hope you are having a beautiful day. This is an episode I was really excited to record and share with you, and I really just want it to be a very raw, very real and vulnerable conversation. And with today's episode, we are getting into the various ways that I feel I have changed since my parents died, ways that my grief has changed me and things my grief has taught me. And by sharing this aspect of my journey of grief with you today, my hope is that your gain will be to think about this from the perspective of your own loss and, what ways you can learn and grow and evolve from your own loss, whatever that may be for you. I would definitely say that for most of us, it's easy to say that we've changed or have learned about ourselves or are at least in the process of doing this after a loss. But I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper today to get specific about the ways that this can happen and how we get there. And more importantly, why and why this is important in our journey of life here. And how we can actually use these things that we've learned to our benefit. So even though I'm going to use my specific ways that I feel I've been changed or continue to change since the death of my parents, I want for you to think about this in your own terms and how this applies to you and your grief journey. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Number one, I'm just going to be very blunt here. My attitude has changed. I think I'm still very much the same person in a lot of ways, but when I say my attitude has changed, I actually mean this in a few ways. And the first way, I wish I had a less blunt way of saying this, but I'll be completely honest with you. I have a more I don't give a fuck attitude. And I'm sorry for the swearing here, but I think this is really because of the knowing that life is fleeting and there's really only the here and now. And that is not to say I'm always the most present person in the world. Like, trust me, this is a work in progress. But it's hard after a loss to, look at things the same way. And I want to also say here, this isn't to say like I don't care about anyone else or anyone else's opinions and that I'm going to do what I want when I want. It's not about that at all. It's really all it comes down to is about a new level of confidence that I think I had before, but it's really just kind of grown and evolved a little bit. And what I mean by that is, in my thoughts and my decisions and how I want my life to go. And my attitude towards that has really changed quite a bit. Another aspect of this changed attitude is I kind of feel the need to defend myself at times in terms of what I know I'm capable of, particularly when or if people question me. And it's not like this happens a lot, but kind of what I've noticed about myself is I don't like to be questioned. I mean, who does really? But really what I mean by this is I want to be believed in. And when people don't believe in me or maybe don't feel I'm capable of something in the way that I know I am, this makes me want to fight harder for it. And, this makes my spirit wake up a little more and makes me more determined than ever to do something. And I'll use my husband as an example here, but I want to preface this by saying that he is super supportive. He's literally the best husband. I can't complain. But for example, recently, as of the time of this recording at least, we are talking about having a family. We're on that path. And with losses become gains, it's really kind of only been out in the world for, I don't know, like since November 2022, and it's now June 2023. So I guess 7-8 months, right? And he had mentioned one day, like, okay, we'll start a family, bring a child into the world, but I do worry, like, are you going to be able to keep doing everything you're doing now when that happens? Like, I worry about that. You're on such a roll. You're doing so much. You're launching, your course and your podcast and all these things, but is that really sustainable? Like, is that really realistic? And what I will say about our personalities, we mesh so well in so many ways. I am definitely the type, though, to live with my head in the clouds a little bit. I am a dreamer, and this is really what got me going with losses become gains in the first place. He, on the other hand, is a touch more pragmatic. He has his dreams too, but he's just more realistic. He can bring me back down to earth a little bit while I sort of inspire him to dream. So it's a nice, balance. But in him saying that immediately sparked something in me. I can't even really describe it, but I was like, yeah, I can do it. Of course I can. Why would you even, put that out there? And, my very positive mindset kicked in of of course I will. If I put my mind to it, of course I can do it. And I love that about myself. I never want that to be dampened by me or anybody else. And even though he was saying these things completely out of love and more concern than anything, what I'm getting at here is my journey with adversity and loss makes me know and feel that I am capable of it. And it makes me want to prove that to him or anyone else, and especially to myself, to rise above any, I don't want to say negativity, but any concern or doubt that other people might have. And listen, even if they're right, you could be very correct. Listen, I don't have a kid right yet. I don't know how things might evolve. I know they're hard work. I see my friends and some family members have these babies, and I know life changes. I can't begin to relate to that yet. So even if he's right in a way, I believe in myself more than ever because I know I've handled a lot before, and I can certainly do that again, even if the context is a little bit different. Another way that my attitude has changed is I am definitely more of a let's talk about it, let's go there kind of girl. And I feel like I was like this before, but as I've gotten older and come out of my shell even more, there are few conversations that I fear anymore because I sort of know that life is too short not to have those conversations. But I also want to make it clear, this is easier said than done. But frankly, I think it's this mindset that has also caused me to become a coach and want to help people. And it's the premise of this podcast. I want to dig deep. I want to be, that person for someone who's yeah, you know what? We can get deep. There's no shame here. There's no skirting around this. Let's go there because we have to sometimes. We have to in order to address these things and ultimately cope with our grief. Because even if it's not a conversation with maybe someone I have a relationship with or someone I know or a friend or whatever, there's just knowing that having these tough conversations does, with time, make them easier. And it makes a huge impact on your life in really big and beautiful ways. And this is why I'm such a proponent in talking about grief and normalizing it. I mean, I say this on my website. I want to do this in the most human to human way possible because that's what we're here doing, right? Having this human experience. And the more that it's talked about, the more healing that happens. That is what I truly believe and have found to be true in my own case and with other grievers as well. And it's really such a gift. Another way that my attitude has really changed, and I noticed this big time when I was first really going through my earlier stages of grief, that acute grief right after, this was especially right after both parents were gone at this point, is I definitely had sort of this me against the world syndrome, as I like to call it. I didn't feel like anyone else could feel my grief as profoundly as I could. No one could relate to me. No one was even trying. And I've said it before, but I felt like I was very much on my own on this very thin raft in the middle of the ocean, barely getting by, barely staying afloat. And if you're listening to this, that is a feeling you might be able to relate to. Now, there is some truth to this in that I was my parents' only daughter. Of course, no one could quite relate to the loss of my parents the way that I could, but just like I can't relate to my grandmother who lost her daughter, right? We all have our own journeys, our own experiences that are all unique with losing someone that we love. And for example, even if I had siblings, which I don't, we'd all experience it a little bit differently because we all have different relationships with the deceased, right? But to think I didn't have support or to think I didn't have people around me who cared, not quite right, because I did, and that wasn't the case. And I think I knew that deep down, but I'll be honest with you, I really isolated myself in this process. Either way, whether I did this isolation on purpose or not, I don't really know. I think it was a little mix of both. While it was difficult, it has also brought me a sense of strength and independence and has forced me to tap into parts of myself and parts of my mind and my soul that I may not have otherwise. So listen, this isn't to say you have to go and self-isolate and be like, I'm doing this on my own and that's it and that's all. But I do want you to know that if you are feeling this way, one, it is extremely normal, and a lot of us go through this. It can feel very lonely and isolating after we go through a loss, even if we have all the support around us possible. But number two, to think about this in a way where you can tap into your inner strength, get to know yourself, and know that you are capable of enduring some really difficult stuff. All right, so number one, that was how my attitude shifted. Another way that I feel I have changed since going through my grief, still going through my grief, is I am better at managing my emotions and have gained a lot of coping skills. I mean, listen, we talk about this a lot on the podcast. We have in previous episodes. We're going to continue to talk about more of this, so I will keep this one brief. But I mean, really, this came down to figuring out grief work and what the heck that even was. We have an episode on that you can listen to. I'll put that in the show notes. And also dealing with things with, on my own, but also with a therapist. I definitely went to therapy for a few months virtually. It was in 2020, so it was during COVID. I actually used Talkspace, which I loved. But there's a million different examples of coping tools, and some of the ones that have worked best for me were reading inspirational books. I might have mentioned this already, but Untamed by Glennon Doyle was a life-changing book for me in the beginning, to be honest, not only with getting me through my grief, but really like rediscovering myself again. Breath work, meditation, making sure I got good sleep, which honestly was kind of difficult. I mean, I was living in the condo that my parents owned right when both were, dying and had died at that point. And so there was a lot of like peace that I had to somehow discover amidst all of this. So it was really just finding ways to be present. And by the way, speaking of presence, I have a practice in presence toolkit on my website. It is a totally free tool that you can use right now. And there are various activities and breath work and things like that in that resource that you can use right now to help you start tapping into that. But amongst many things, those are like some of my top coping tools that I've used to really get a handle on my grief and my emotions and being able to help identify them and really feel them in the moment. And truly, this has helped me so much, not only with my grief, but honestly, other situations too. Like if somebody like cuts me off, right, driving or something, and, my immediate reaction might be like, oh my God, what are you doing? Or I might get upset about that, right? Or somebody says something insensitive. It happens, especially on social media. Just finding ways to be less phased in life and know that this is all a part of the journey. All right, so next way that I have changed since going through my loss is really I know what I want and need and deserve so much more clearly than I did before. And simply put, I think loss just really makes you realize how short and fleeting life can be. And it can make you feel a bit less open to settling, quite honestly. And there's a couple of examples with this in my life. I mean, when my husband and I got back together, if you didn't know this already, we did break up for a short time. If you didn't catch that episode already, please do. It's so good. It's right before this one. But we get into all of that. But I knew going back into that relationship, reuniting, there were things that I was not going to settle on. And I think he actually figured that out too, which is beautiful. I mean, this is not all about me here, right? Like this goes for all of us. And death and going through loss really makes us take a step back and take inventory and realize what is important to us. And I've even had this happen with friendships where I've gotten closer with some people, and there have been other people in my life where I've really had to take a step back and be like, you know what? This is not how you treat a friend. This is not how you treat another human. And I've really had to take a good look at some of the relationships in my life and, not cancel other people, but certainly, do what is in my best interest. And so that way they can do what is in the best interest of them as well. This is important for all of us. Another way that my grief has changed me is perspective and really reality checking myself a lot better now. And for me, this really means just frankly not getting as upset over the little things. And listen, I'm still human. So like I said with that road rage example, right? We still might get annoyed if something like that happens, or if my husband forgets to clean something that I asked him to clean, or whatever it is, right? But at the end of the day, I've started to have more moments of perspective where, for example, I catch myself perhaps getting worked up over something, but then taking a step back and being like, nope, this is not as big of a deal as you're making it to be right now, Tara. Come on, let's have some perspective here. And perspective too can also just mean, another one for me is being on my phone, and especially with having such an online presence, business, whatever you want to call it. I am on my phone a lot. I'm on Instagram a lot. And I've really had to have moments where I'm like, no, I need to put that down. I need to focus. I want to focus on making dinner with my husband, or being present here with him as we're watching this movie at night, and not sitting on my laptop and working. Or, if there's a moment where I'm just outside and it's a beautiful day outside, and maybe I'm going on a walk or a bike ride, and maybe I'm listening to a podcast or music or something, or, I stop and I sit on a bench, pressing pause, turning it off for a moment and being like, I am here. Let me soak this in. Let me take a moment where I'm not talking to someone, or I'm not on my phone, or, just taking a moment to breathe and soak in everything around me. And I think that's so important in this, time of life where technology is so prevalent, and there's AI and all the things, and we're all on our computers so much. And this is just an example, right? Think about ways where you can really tap into this in your own life too. But I think it's such an important practice, and that perspective can really hit us in so many different ways. And those reality checks of you know what, this is not something I need to be so reactionary to, or this is a place in my life where I really need to compartmentalize a little bit between work and my family, and whatever this looks like for you. So I just encourage you today to think about this, think about what this could look like in your life, and how you might want to possibly make some changes here. Another way that my grief journey has changed me is my capacity for adversity has increased. So less tends to faze me now. Truthfully, I'm just not as fazed by things. I wish I had a better way of saying that, but it's this feeling of knowing that it could be worse, that it has been worse. So, I feel like so many of us go through this where, for example, someone is complaining that their mom is nagging them, or their dad did this, or their sibling did that, or their child is just annoying them so much, or whatever it is, right? Depending on who we've lost, my God, I wish my mom could be here to nag me again. There are people out there that wish that they had a child that was doing something annoying one day, and, but what they wouldn't give to just have a child, right? So whatever this looks like for you, a partner, right? A spouse where maybe they've lost a spouse and you're like, oh my God, I would do anything to have a date night with my person again. And there are so many things that we take advantage of when we have these things and then they're gone, right? This kind of ties into the perspective we were just talking about. But again, for example, if people maybe underestimate me or worry about me being able to do something or handle something, to just bring it back to my original point here, it kind of makes me be like, okay, I'll show you. And that okay, I'll show you attitude becomes that much stronger because with this adversity, I know I can. I know what I'm capable of. So again, when I was talking about my husband earlier and being kind of concerned if I could keep up certain things, like I know he knows I'm capable of it. But internally, only I can really know and feel like, you know what? I've seen some shit. I've been through some shit. I've seen it before and I can do it again. Like I'm less phased. And loss has also increased my need for feeling like I have to be on the defensive sometimes. And, there are moments where I kind of feel like I am going through this world a little more on my own than I was before, than when I had my parents. But what I want to say here, and I just think this is such a beautiful and powerful thing, it's knowing that I am my biggest advocate. It's knowing that and feeling that I have maybe more to prove or more to live up to. I almost don't know how to describe this, but that feeling has resulted in, frankly, putting pressure on myself at times and overthinking and questioning and feeling very alone in terms of who I can talk to about certain things at times. And so much of this is because these are things that I would go to my parents for. Or, however this applies to you, if you're maybe missing your partner, maybe they were your go-to for certain things. And that's hard. That absence is so difficult. And it's like the person or people that we're grieving are the ones that we need the most support from. Those are the people that we would go to for these hard things. And that is really hard to grapple with. But that leads me to my next point and the next way that my grief has changed me in some ways. And this is a more positive thing. It's allowed me to be more comfortable in my own skin and more independent. So, not to put too fine a point on it, but I love being alone. I do sometimes wonder, honestly, how much the pandemic affected this. I think having a lot of my trauma happen during COVID definitely had a difference on this. I think I was more isolated in some ways, but not always in a bad way, if I'm being honest. My journey of loss has given me independence. It really kind of forced me to take a step back. I think I've said this like 8 times in this episode already, is this taking a step back, but that's so important sometimes is, kind of in our mind, literally like taking this step back and really taking stock of my life and being like, okay, let me see how I do on my own, because I am sort of on my own here. Of course, I have my husband and I'm very grateful for him. I have his family. I have my friends. I still have my family around me, but there really is such an on my ownness that has come from losing my mom and dad and from losing them very close together and earlier on in my life. There is a lot I'm going to have to navigate on my own. And I feel that way because nobody can really empathize with my loss in the way that I can. But that relationship with ourselves, that is insanely important. And I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, I can't even remember now, but my mom always used to say, we come into this world alone and we go out alone. And I know that's a bit morbid and it's very ironic with her not being here now, but in a way, she's not wrong. And again, we might have our loved ones around us, we might have our loved ones in spirit, but our soul and us as beings here, that is such an important relationship to nurture. and discover and get to know. And that process can be really exciting, actually. And this is why discovering ourselves and being not only comfortable with ourselves, but loving ourselves is one of the most spectacular things that we have and that we can tap into. And so I want to encourage you today. I want to empower you to get excited about that. One of the final ways, I only have a couple more here, I promise, is that my grief has changed me, is that I am more grateful. Simply put, I have found more gratitude in my life, but this has taken a lot of work. I thought I was a grateful person before I lost my parents, but oh man, since going through devastating loss, again, it really puts things into perspective. And again, I talk about gratitude so much and having a gratitude practice, and I cannot begin to tell you how much of a game changer that has been for me. So I think I've said this before. I'm going to say it again here really quickly. When I wake up, I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. Before I go to bed, I also make sure I tap into that, just saying something I'm grateful for that day, something that happened, a highlight of my day. And you might have heard me say this before, but when we go through loss, it can feel like there is very little to be grateful for, and that is really hard to tap into. But that's why I encourage journaling so much, and it's why I encourage feeling gratitude in even the smallest things. I've used this example too, but just like the tea or the coffee in your cup that morning. Maybe reading 10 pages of a book that you enjoy, going on a 5 or 10 minute walk and just breathing in that fresh air, hearing birds outside of your window. Whatever this is for you, someone giving you a smile when they handed you your coffee at the coffee shop this morning, And with that, you work that up. You work up that gratitude muscle to see that it's abundant and it's out there, even when it feels like it's not. All right, so one of the very last things I was going to mention here today, and this is really the crux of what has gotten me to this point in my life right now. But I will be really honest with you. With my parents' deaths, I feel like I have found my purpose in life. A new life. It has allowed me to tap into my dharma, my purpose, if you haven't heard that term before, to find more freedom and joy and fulfillment. And listen, I don't know if I ever would have gotten into the grief space if it weren't for the deaths of my parents. I don't know, really. I guess at the end of the day, I might have, right? And someone asked me the question. I was on a podcast. I should preface this by saying I was a guest on a podcast. I'm really excited for this one to come out. It was a really profound and deep conversation. And the host asked me the question of, and I'm totally paraphrasing this now. He did an amazing job of asking this question, so I'm probably going to botch it. But he essentially kind of asked whether I felt that my parents basically had to die, that this was the journey that I had to go through in my life, that their deaths had to happen in order for me to tap into my dharma, into my purpose. And I know that might sound kind of like a morbid question, but I actually really appreciated it. And I loved that he didn't impose that on me. He asked that to me in a way where I could really sit and think about that. And so what I want to clarify here is I don't know. I like to not think that my parents had to die for me to tap into everything I'm doing here, but that is an interesting thing to ponder, isn't it? That there might be some higher power at work here. Who knows? But I also want to say, and this is something I'm so excited about, as of this recording, in addition to being a grief coach currently, I am working to become a Dharma coach or a soul purpose coach through the Dharma Coaching Institute. If you don't know Sahara Rose, you totally should. I have been following her and her podcast, the Highest Self podcast, for a while now, and finally made the jump to up my coaching game. And really in doing this, I wanted to take grief work and working on our grief a step further. Because as I always say, grief is a part of life. I certainly didn't come up with that concept, okay? It's just something I like to reiterate. Grief is a part of life. And we can work on our grief separately and we can work on ourselves separately. But really, in my own grief healing journey, what I realized is I kind of ended up working on both simultaneously, like accidentally. But in doing that, I kind of did myself a favor. And with grief, so often we can feel like we don't know where to go, where to turn, what to do with ourselves, or who we even are anymore after a devastating loss, especially if we really attach our identity to who we've lost, right? So maybe you were married for like 40 plus years and you go through a divorce. Like that's a really hard thing to kind of like disconnect yourself from. But in tapping into our dharma and tapping into our soul's purpose here as we live out this human experience, this is one of the many ways that we can find a semblance of healing, abundance, hope, meaning, purpose in our life, all the things. So I think that's just so important. So I want for you to walk away like keeping this in mind today. So as you work on your grief and as you tap into your grief work and you take these little baby steps, right? That's all it's about. We're planting seeds as always. But think about this, and you don't have to have the answers today. I mean, certainly it took me a while to even realize that what I'm doing here and trying to help other people journey through their grief as well, that this is my dharma. This is what I really feel like I'm meant to be doing. This is my calling, if you will. And it takes a lot of people a long time to figure this out sometimes, but that's what I'm here to do today. I want to empower you with everything that we've talked about today. But that's really where I want to leave you with this conversation, and just for you to know that you are so capable of tapping into that and finding that and thriving in that. Okay? So that's what I had for you today. So not only did I just want to share this aspect of my journey with you, but I really hope today's conversation perhaps inspired you in some way or sparked something within you to empower you to think about your loss a little differently, to see and understand what growth and evolution can come from it. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here today and soaking it all in, as always. And remember, if you need further support with your grief or whatever hardship you're going through right now, my Grief Becomes Gains online course is available to you. That is all the details are on my website, and I've also linked it here in the show notes. Long story short, it is a 10-module self-paced course that takes you through countless aspects of the grief journey. It really helps you set the foundation to understand what is grief and what is going on in our brains as we're trying to grapple with our new reality. And understanding that and having that foundation is so important in dealing with grief and coping with it really for the rest of our lives. And what is especially cool about the course is that you have access to a monthly group coaching call with me. So you get access to me on a monthly basis. And really, I just want to be able to help you on a more personal level journey through your grief with you. I want to be your friend in the grief space, as I always say. So there's that. But also remember that the Losses Become Gains Podcast Insiders Facebook group is also available that you can join, where you can connect with others journeying through grief or another hardship as well. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I really always wanted this to be about community. So I wanted to create a space where we can all lift each other up and share these things and really talk about them. And so I'm super excited to have you join and be a part of that. I welcome you into that group with open arms. And who knows, you might make a friend or two through that as well. I am part of multiple Facebook groups, and I can genuinely say I've made some amazing connections, met some fabulous people. So again, I really hope you utilize that. It is there for you. So with that all being said, thank you so much again for being here today, and I will see you in the next episode.